Hi, welcome to the Math Dive in 5 for 4th grade. Today we're going to talk about rounding and place value. My name's Bailey.
And I'm Amy.
So before we start our work today, I want you to pause the video and do this first task. You're going to do this task on your own or with a team or even just a partner. I want you to solve the 5 tasks that are on the screen and then you're going to order them in the learning progression. When you're solving these, I want you to consider what student learning needs to happen before students can be successful with each of these individual tasks. So we take a minute and look at the progression with best standards based on rounding, and we look at third grade. Third grade really starts with composing and decomposing those 4-digit numbers in multiple ways based off place value. They plot, order, and compare numbers up to 10,000, and they also round numbers to 1,000 to the nearest 10 or 100. When they move into 4th grade, they're going to build on that understanding, and they're now going to round numbers between 0 and 10,000 to the nearest 10, 100, and 1,000. 4th graders are also expected to use rounding to estimate solutions to problems using any of the 4 operations. As students leave 4th grade and go to 5th grade, they'll start rounding multi-digit numbers, including decimals, to the 100th, the 10th, or the whole number place.
So I can kind of see the connection from each grade level, just adding on different place values each time, and then with 5th grade, adding those decimals as well.
And that's exactly true. It's a lot of the same content, we're just building and expanding their understanding. So for this Dive in 5 video, we're really going to focus on rounding whole numbers from 0 to 10,000 to the nearest 10, 100, or 1,000 place. So we're going to take some time and we're going to talk about some models and strategies that we're going to use throughout this video. So for students to be successful with rounding in 4th grade, they need to understand how to represent numbers using concrete tools based off place value. So we can use base 10 blocks, and then as the numbers get larger, we can start to use place value disc.
In order to round, students will also be using number lines. Students will be giving scaled and open number lines to round to the nearest 10, 100, or 1,000 place value.
Absolutely. So students will be plotting their number on this number line, and then they'll use that to determine which multiple is closest to. As students move throughout this understanding and they begin to get a solid ground of rounding, they're going to start using this to estimate solutions and to do things in basically do mental math in their head with the 4 operations.
To begin with, students can round using concrete tools. Students can get an understanding for the value of each number. They can use base 10 blocks and also place value discs. As the numbers get larger, we can transition from those base 10 blocks to the place value discs to understand the value of each digit.
So as students are working with these concrete tools, they also need to understand that if I have 10 tens, I can represent it as 100. And this is going to be really important when students have to round numbers and it affects more than one place value. The task number 3 was an example where it changed multiple place values, so students really need to have a strong understanding of all the values of the digits before they can do a rounding problem like this. Once students have an understanding of how to represent numbers using concrete tools, they can move to rounding with scaled number lines. So at the beginning of the unit, students should be given scaled number lines. And task number 5 is an example where they're given a number line and they're being asked to round that number to the nearest 1,000. Students will first use the number line to plot the number on the scaled number line.
And then once they have the number plotted, they can determine which number it's closest to, and we want them to use that place value language. So you can see at the bottom, the number 1,563 is past the halfway point between 1,000 and 2,000, and it's closer to 2,000.
Absolutely. So we really want them to make connections between their place value and their number lines while they're learning rounding. Once students have an understanding of how to round using scaled number lines, they'll move to open number lines. These number lines require students to determine the endpoints and the midpoint. So if you look at the task number 2 that you did earlier in the video, you have round 2,141 to the nearest 1,000. And you'll notice on my number line, I have the numbers 2,000 and 3,000 as my endpoints because I'm rounding to the thousands place, and then my midpoint is that 2,500.
So we can then see, once the number is plotted on the number line, which endpoint it's closest to. We can also see at the bottom the place value language that we want students to use when representing with these number lines.
As students really develop a deep understanding of rounding, they can start to generate numbers that follow a specific rounding rule. In order for students to be successful with this task, they have to understand what happens to the value of the digits when numbers are rounded to specific places.
So you can see on the screen in task number 1, the task was to generate 3 numbers that round to 4,300 when rounded to the nearest hundred. We can see here's 3 numbers at the bottom, and for example, the middle number, 4,291, is closer to 4,300 than 4,200.
Absolutely. And any of the strategies that we've used so far, students can use to figure out any of the numbers that will follow this rounding rule. Students will then extend their knowledge of rounding to estimate solutions. So for example, task number 4 had this problem. You had to estimate the sum using rounding. Students have to first determine where they're going to round all 3 of those numbers to. So since the number 63 is the only number that doesn't have a hundreds place, I would round all of these numbers to the nearest 10. Once students have rounded the numbers, they can then use mental math to solve and get an estimate.
So estimating solutions can be really important when determining the reasonableness for the answers.
Throughout this rounding unit, students will be going back and forth between the CRA. So for concrete model, you'd have base 10 blocks and place value disks. Students will move into that representational thinking using those scaled number lines and open number lines. And then finally, with the abstract thinking, they'll start to use that rounding to estimate mental calculations.
We want them to go back and forth between these bridges, not just go in order, so that they can connect all of the different parts of the CRA model.
Absolutely, and those bridges just get stronger the more we go back and forth. Thanks so much for joining us today for our Math Dive in 5 for 4th grade rounding. We hope you got a lot out of it, and we hope you come back to see us next time.
See you later.